Okay.
Yeah, I think you need to turn your volume on one of them, otherwise you'll have an echo.
Yeah, just disconnected that. Okay, so I'm set up. These are my opening remarks. Right, okay, well, there we are. Hopefully we're welcoming people. Pauline, like my post.
Hey, Pete. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Nunes just told me it's recording and it's going live on YouTube right now.
Excellent. Oh, it's going live on YouTube. Very good.
Yeah.
Oh, we're live on YouTube right now. What, on the Resident Association page?
Which page is that, Nuno? Which channel?
Where is it on Facebook?
Oh, on Nuno's page. Okay, we can copy the link onto.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
No. Great. Okay. Hello, Fran. You're looking lost. Oh, your microphone's off, so I can't hear you. Anyway, you're here. That's the main thing.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now. Yeah. Just,
yeah, I thought I'd try to get in a bit earlier so I don't get caught up with this fight.
I know. I mean, in order to cope, I have to have my phone do the sound and to take video of me because my computer doesn't. And then I have the computer to try and keep track of everything that's going on.
Okay. Hi, V. How you doing? You're busy as usual.
Sorry, I'm muting myself because I'm typing away. I don't want you to hear the click
All right.
my keyboard.
I'll let you get on.
Just preparing what I've got to say. Well, finalizing really.
Okay.
Making sure videos are on cue and everything.
Okay. I'm going to the other room. I'll be back in a minute. Just wanted to make sure this was on.
Right, good. It's been a bit. Right.
Right. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we've got residents wanting to join already. We've got Samara, we've got Michaela.
Yeah.
It's only 7:23, but shall I start
Okay.
letting people in?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello, Summer.
Hello.
Hi, you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm okay.
Great. That was Vanilla I saw
Yeah.
once. Yeah. Hi, Vanilla. Oh, how come I can't hear you?
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted. I'm typing away, so you don't hear my clickety clack on the keyboard.
How are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. Busy, but you know.
Yeah. We all are.
How you been? Good?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Locked in.
Yeah.
Hi, Michaela. You all right? Good to see you. I got no sound for you yet.
Yeah, everyone is muted upon.
Okay. Hello.
Hi, you all right?
Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hello.
Hi. Good to see you. We've got, I think Subbu is ill. He said he's in bed today. So we may not have him speaking, but we will have yourself, I'm sure Kosti, and Ruby has prepared something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be bringing you in. Let me see, possibly just before 8. It's best to mute this. Can you still hear me?
I can.
Yeah,
good.
we can hear you.
I just played with my microphone. I want to see if I can just mute myself. There we are. So, Michaela, did you manage to speak? Oh, you were too busy, weren't you? I wonder if Kosti managed to speak to that woman.
Yes, unfortunately, my afternoon was horrible today, and I didn't want to commit to something which I knew is not going to be possible to happen.
No, that's fine. And as I say, Carmen definitely spoke to her Melanie something via Skype. And hello, RA. Who's RA? Or is that? Oh,
Could be Harahi. Oh, God, someone's presenting. Yeah, I need, before we start the meeting, Pete, we need to ask people to mute themselves and not to press anything else, because otherwise it's going to mess up all of our presentation. Rahi, can you stop presenting, please? Whoever, if that's you, RA, just unclick the button because you're presenting, you're showing us your screen. Thank you.
Very good. William Barbosa, yeah. Yes, hi.
Thanks, Nuno. By the way, we're broadcasting live on YouTube. Nuno's just posted the link on the chat box. If you want to check us out on YouTube, it's been recorded live. We haven't started yet. Give a few more minutes for people to start coming in. Hi, Jamie.
Hi. Welcome to is that Jennifer?
Hi, Matt.
Frame from Richmond.
Yeah, hi, Pete. It's Jennifer.
Hi. I've got a
One
slot.
of the other residents joining as well from Richmond House, so there'll be 2 of us. Thank you.
Excellent.
Perfect, great.
Hello,
Lovely.
Serena. We'll be, yes, I've got a 5-minute slot to call you in, Jennifer, in a bit.
Okay, no worries.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm Yasser here.
Hi, Yasser. Yeah. Hi, Jamie.
Let's just give a few more minutes for people to join.
Yeah. Hi, Matt.
Hi everyone.
Hi. I can get 9 people on my screen, but I can't, it won't scroll. I don't see anything that allows me to scroll it between different screens. If anybody knows how, there's nothing down either side to let me scroll.
Maybe there are only 9 people?
No, there's more. There's close to 20 now. Pete, you see the little 3 dots at the bottom right of your screen?
Yeah.
If you click and change layout, you can
Yeah.
see as many people as you want, and you can have a tiled screen. You can have full screen on one person.
I'm on the right. So I'm on the tiled screen, and it's now brought me in a good deal more people. Yeah, that's good. Right. I thought I was on the tiled screen already. So if you go to the tiled, if you go back and then out and then back to the tiled, maybe it expands it even further. Right. So it's 7:30 now, but as usual, we have a flood of people joining at this time. So people will be used to us. Just holding on. There's Costi. Hi, Costi. All right, mate. Could you just check out your sound and get your sound working? Because I'll be calling you in later. I can't hear you at the moment. Oh, yeah, because you're on mute. I can't unmute you. Can you unmute people?
No, he needs to unmute himself.
Costi, you'll have to find that mute. I think it's when you press this screen, the mute button comes up right in the middle of it. You can press your picture of yourself. That's Sean. Hi. Press the middle of the screen there, Costi.
That's it.
There you go.
I got you. Right.
There you go, guys. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got 3 expert. We've got 3 expert witnesses, and we've got 3 resident witnesses who volunteered to come in. But there will also be questions at the end of the inquiry after we hopefully get some input from the landlords, the builders. We've got Mace hopefully turning up. I have down 3 expert witnesses to speak to the meeting, and they are Jonathan Evans, Suzanne Mooner, and Sean Murphy. If other commissioners want to speak, then you should indicate to come in and say your piece. Perhaps use the chat to do that. Hello, Anna. We're just holding on just a few extra minutes.
Dr. Jonathan Evans has just joined us as well.
Right, Pete. Excellent. Welcome, Jonathan. 23 now. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got about 16 on my screen. I think that's as many as it'll do. So I can't see you all, I don't think. Unless there is some way of scrolling from screen to screen. I don't see. Any further advice, Vanilla? I'm getting from I've got 4 times 4, 16 people.
I think that's as many as you're going to get, Pete.
You can't let it go to the next.
Councillor Cameron Geddes has just joined us as well.
Welcome, Councillor Geddes. Right, so the time is now 9:33. We'll give it 2 more minutes. And welcome to Melanie from the BBC. Hi. We'll try and mute you all when we get started because you sometimes get extraneous sound coming from mobile phones and other things. We've got 26 joined us so far. And yeah, I'll start in 1 minute. I hope you've all had time to see the report that we have produced. Let's see, where's the chat? Oh, there it is. Yeah. So, yeah. I think that's a link there. Yeah, that works. Right. So I think, shall we get started, folks?
Yeah, just a couple of things before you start, Pete.
Okay.
I just want to make sure everyone's muted. Make sure, because as Pete said earlier, there might be background noises. You're welcome to raise questions on the chat box. And obviously we will bring in some residents for testimony, and there will be opportunities for questions as well. I will post the agenda on the chat box for everyone to see. This is being recorded live and is being broadcast via YouTube as well. So the link's already been posted on the chat box there. One last thing, just make sure you do not press the share button. Google Meet is a bit, hasn't managed to sort this out because I can mute everyone, but I can't prevent them from sharing their own screen. We already had that earlier on today. So make sure you don't press the share button, because we will be sharing videos and a presentation on screen. So we need to make sure that that's available for us to do the presentation. So that's it from me, Pete. Go ahead. Right, thanks, Vanilia. So yeah, welcome to everybody to the meeting. We've got 30 currently and more people joining all the time. Welcome in particular to guests from various places, our councillors, Jennifer from Richmond House and Worcester Park, our expert witnesses, Jonathan Evans, Suzanne Mooner, Sean Murphy, and others. Certainly indicate in the chat if you want to come in to speak, but the agenda is as follows. All speakers will be limited to 5 minutes each. I'll start to ask you to sum up if you wander over that. We will be showing videos during the course of my presentation and others. Vanilia and I will present our findings, the Resident Association findings. I'll then introduce the residents from Samuel Garside House who've agreed to sorry, Pete. Can Maria Grixate, Maria, can you stop presenting, please? Just press a little button. Stop presenting. Thank you. Okay. May have a slight problem with that. Hopefully she's heard me and she'll stop presenting. Yes, I think it just happens, doesn't it, if you're not careful. Marija, if you could remove that presentation. So after the testimony from the residents, Jennifer from Richmond House will speak. Then Nuno, our secretary, will look at the wider aspects of the estate through the community interest company. Then he will call on expert witnesses. And we have 3, as I've just said, Jonathan Evans, Suzanne Mooner, and Sean Murphy.
Jonathan is an expert in cladding, Suzanne in housing, and she's on the Union Executive for the last 3 years, and Sean Murphy is a solicitor. And we'll welcome any statements from people who built the estate and who run it. So we have Mace have agreed to join us. I haven't seen anybody, but maybe they're here. And we did have a councillor. Councillor Cameron Geddes appeared momentarily, but then I saw him sign off. Maybe he'll pop in again in a moment. And there were 2 other councillors who indicated they were going to come. We did also have an indication from a GLA guy whose name has unfortunately just came in the last few minutes. Maybe Vanilla can look to see who it is and see if he's arrived, but we can call them in. Cameron Geddes has joined us again. So we'll call Cameron and others in at that point, and then we will invite questions from residents and the press, and then any responses. We won't have a lot of time for that because we must close the meeting at 9:30, and if you count up 5 minutes from all those people that I've mentioned, you very quickly get to an hour or so. So that's the agenda for tonight. Now, I therefore want to present the report from the Residents Association Committee to this inquiry, and we'll be inviting responses to it from the great and the good over the next few months. Samuel Garsted House fire took place 1 year and a day ago. We produced a website, which I've done a link to on the chat, with testimony from residents, and as well as videos from the BBC, ITV and others at www.barkingriversidefire.com. This resident-led inquiry was established at a meeting of 200 residents that we called on the Thursday after the fire, and it was agreed unanimously that residents would make an inquiry. At that time, the official Grenfell inquiry, this was 2 years after the event, had still produced nothing, to great anger of those residents. But since then, the Grenfell inquiry has indeed produced an initial report, and another one is due, I think, shortly, and it specifically made clear to all that the building regulations at base, whatever the government extras might be, government guidance might be, says that external walls should adequately resist the spread of fire, and you can't do that with wood. On the 13th of June, then this meeting with 200 residents agreed, discussed, and passed unanimously a resolution which stated the following: that Bellway and the others involved in the construction and management of the estate were negligent because they failed to address their minds to the obvious risk that from the wooden constructed balconies and cladding, despite previous concerns raised by residents. Now, of course, Bellway say the balconies were actually metal with a little bit of wood decoration, but of course, if the decking is made of wood and the balustrades are made of wood, it's difficult to see how you can claim that they are metal balconies. The foundations were metal. This belief of ours that was passed then was placed beyond any reasonable doubt when the fire brigade report came out. The fire, it said, spread due to the inherent combustibility of the materials used in the balcony structure, which posed a significant risk to life. You can see there some of the residents at the meeting that we held in a shot from the BBC, I believe. Almost any small ignition source, the fire brigade report said, could have started the fire. And we can state as a fact that these balcony structures do not conform to building regulations. Now that report has come out. I'll go into the details of grades of wood and so forth and so on. The report also highlights our report also highlights the greater risk posed. No, it's the fire brigade report. It highlights the greater risk posed to the west-facing side of Samuel Garside House, and we'll hear from a resident who lives on that side, where there are no stairwells to break the fire. And on in Ernest Webster House, which is within sight of Samuel Garside House, if the fire had broken out on the west side, it would have spread right across the whole of the building, as it would on Samuel Garside House. If it had started on the east-facing side, there was a boiler, a temporary boiler situated directly outside, and that would undoubtedly have exploded. It's got a warning outside on it saying not to expose to heat, and then it would have spread the fire to the rest, to the houses opposite, which themselves were linked by wood through 3 streets. And I think a conflagration was entirely possible and was only narrowly avoided by the fact of where it took place. Lives were only lost, another report concluded, because the fire took place during the day, and residents pointed out at our meeting on Thursday, the 13th of July, that if the residents themselves had not run into the building, ran around the building, banging on doors, undoubtedly some would have been caught in the fire. There was a residents' action as well. Now, I haven't much longer. I just want to say 2 more things. First of all, that our report sets out that residents repeatedly raised concerns about the dangers of the fire. We set out 2 well-documented cases. And in them, you will notice our expert witness, Jonathan Evans' presentation on our website is entitled, "Don't Worry, It Meets the Building Regulations." And this was the precise words that we received when residents raised concerns about this flammable material surrounding them on all sides. We got this answer from Pinnacle, from Southern Housing via Pinnacle, from Bellway themselves via Pinnacle, and from BRL again, routing us to Bellway, who gave us the assurances that there was no risk of fire. So I conclude with these words. Housing is in deep crisis. Housing costs take up an unacceptably high proportion of ordinary working people's earnings, consuming their life savings without providing the security that should ensue. The only solution, in our view, is to abandon the present decades-long drive to private ownership of whole estates by faceless landlords like Adriatic, registered overseas in tax havens who only offer leasehold. These people have no desire to see money spent in order to ensure that the residents live safely, free from a fear of fire. We need to stop the continuing drive to shut down council house building and sell off the houses. Private landlords have been shown to sit on land rather than develop it, force up prices, with the result of a chronic undersupply of affordable housing and homelessness that we witness on every high street. The first step in the remedy to this on a national scale is the abolition of leasehold, resident control over estates, particularly ours, resident control over the managing agents on the estates. A mass council house building program, in my view, across the country is required to reset the highest standards of housing by removing the profit motive and the faceless absentee landlords we see with Adriatic, and of course also with the result of Homeground, RMG, and so forth. We have abundant evidence of this in Barking and Dagenham. We only have to look at the Becontree estate considered by its original occupants in the 1950s, who were the well-to-do working class of the day, heaven with the gates off, with front and back gardens now largely sold off and broken up into 2 or more flats apiece. So in conclusion, such a drive would put enormous pressure on the private builders to build to much higher standards. This would in turn mean that safe, affordable private freehold housing on council-maintained land would return. So those are the conclusions at the end of the report. Obviously, we condemn all the parties involved, as I've said at the beginning of my comments, and I now bring in Vanilla to outline the three demands that we've placed on our website on our report.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. My name's Vanilla. I'm the secretary for, sorry, not secretary, treasurer for the Barking Reach Residents Association. And before I outline our demands, I'll just show you another clip from that video that I was just showing you earlier on, now with sound, and just share that. Okay.
Yes, let's see this. That's the woman who came along to our association meeting from the Ministry of Housing. And that's that fella who I slagged off. I can't actually hear any sound. Can you get any, Vanilla?
No.
Oh, well. There we are. That was me on ITV saying that they did nothing. Looking very glum. Okay, do you want to say your piece, Vanilla? You haven't got sound, or are you working on getting sound?
Did no one hear that? No sound. Oh, okay. That's a shame. Well, I'll post a link on the chat so you can hear it. Basically, that was part of the one of the, I think it was ITV report that kind of combined what James Brokenshire was saying in terms of regulations for buildings under 18 meters. Basically, the reason why I showed you that, and you can see that on the chat box whenever you've got time, is basically what brings me to our three demands on our report. So I live just a few meters away from where the fire happened last year, and my house is about 40% covered in this wooden flammable material. My property is one of a row of 12 properties, all of them with joining wooden flammable cladding. And of course, they are all under 18 meters. What does that mean? It means that, I'm sure you'll hear later on from Dr. Evans, the regulations put in place by the government, that certain regulations only apply to buildings higher than 18 meters. And this is just, it's just very disturbing, because residents live in the area that is full of this flammable cladding. And at that meeting, following the fire at Samuel Garside House on the 9th of June, the Resident Association, as Pete said, held the emergency meeting on the 13th of June. And at that meeting, residents passed 3 motions that opposed by the association with 3 demands. One of them was the first demand was to ensure that all flammable material was to be removed from all parts of the estate in consultation with residents at the cost of the developer, the landlord, or the government. The second demand, which Nuno, our secretary, will be talking about, is on guaranteeing that there's resident control over the estate. That's our demand number 2. But I also wanted to talk to you about demand number 3, which is to remove Adriatic land from the estate. At the moment, Adriatic is the landlord of various buildings on phase 1 of Barking Riverside Estate, and they have proved to be well, they're an investor, basically. So they are not in this business to build a community. They are in this business to make money. So as long as they comply with regulations, that's all they're going to do. So several blocks of flats and houses, as I said. In the fire, there's been 20 flats destroyed and damaged. Was it 20, 30? I'm not even sure how many, around 30 flats or so. And our report shows that this was due to the speed of the spread of the flames on the flammable wooden flammable cladding that we have on the building. And if it had not been for the immediate and urgent action of residents in the block and the surrounding area and all the neighbors to sound the alarms and call neighbors out, if it had taken place at night, as many people have wondered, there surely have been fatalities, and we have been lucky enough that all residents from the building escaped with life. So the report also states that this fire was completely, entirely preventable. Several blocks of flats and houses, as I said, continue to have this wooden cladding, endangering the lives of hundreds of residents. It needs to be rectified as soon as possible. Of course, we are, unprecedented times, but removing cladding, the flammable cladding, needs to be treated as top priority. Everything must go and must be replaced with adequate and safe cladding. Now, I wanted to bring in the, testimonies from various residents. Pete, do you want to present who is coming in to give testimonials at the moment?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much, Vanilia. So our first person is Mihaela. I'd like to bring in to make 5 minutes testimony now.
Hi, hello,
Hi.
good evening, everyone. Hi. What can I say? It's been a very tough year for everyone. Firstly, we had to fight with the trauma from the fire. We all left with scars and obviously bad dreams from whatever we experienced. And
sorry, Michaela, you're breaking up. Internet problems, maybe? Hello, are you there?
All right, if we turn off, somebody suggested if we turn off our videos, then there won't be so much strain on the video. I don't know.
No, I don't think that would be a problem.
No, that wouldn't affect it.
It wouldn't affect it. Mihaela, we've lost you.
I think if you are using Virgin Media in the area, guys, Virgin Media has got a network problem. You're lucky if you don't have Virgin Media.
Switch to BT.
Oh my God.
So, yeah.
Well, do you want to move on to maybe someone else, Pete?
Mihaela, we'll just move on to Ruby, if we might just, if Ruby, you would like to present your testimony. Mihaela, we just lost you for a minute then. We'll move on to Ruby and then we'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. I think my Virgin Media just decided to interrupt the connection, so I don't know.
Well, look, since we've got you back, go on. You want to finish up what you had to say. That's the best one, isn't it?
What I had to say is fight.
Oh, it's gone again, is it?
I think, is it working now?
Go on, yeah.
Yeah, it's working, yeah.
So fighting with all the agencies involved is just very, very tiring. The way they treated us, it was absolutely shocking. All our rights, they've just been literally shoved under the carpet. From the first day when they brought their independent surveyors to survey our flats, the reports they came back inaccurate, where obviously they tried to conceal the damages, the real damages, and they tried to present it only on their ways. Just going to the fact that we lived in the temporary accommodations, not knowing from one day to the other what's going to happen to us. They tried to bring us back in our properties where the building was half burned, and it was just basically a building site. until today, when the balconies they're replaced. We're living in a building site. Obviously, the tool is even harder because majority of us were working from home, and you have to hear this noise around from 8 o'clock to 5 every single day. Obviously, it's so much happening, and it's so much happened on this year. And I don't understand how they can treat people in this way. It's just unbelievable. A very sad experience, which it left lots of scars on us. And I hope one day all of us will be able to walk and just not have this fire in our heads. That's all I can hope so.
Okay, thank you very much, Michaela. Can I bring in Ruby, please?
Hi. So basically, it's been 1 year since the fire in Samuel Garside House, and still the flammable timber cladding hasn't been removed. You know, it's on Ernest Webstale House, it's on Samuel Garside House, it's on other houses in Barking Riverside. So that means that the whole area is still a risk of fire because we've got this combustible cladding which hasn't been removed. The flammable timber-clad balconies are a fire risk, and the whole world saw that on the 9th of June 2019 when the fire broke out on one of the balconies, and the fire spread very rapidly from one timber balcony to the next. And you know, it was only because of the stairwell breaks that stopped it from spreading even further. And then the fires went into the flats and burnt the flats through. You know, so property's completely gone, everything's damaged, destroyed. You know, I shudder to think what would have happened if the fire had started on the park side of the block, because that side has the timber balconies without any breaks, and my flat's on that side as well. And had the fire started on that side, you know, it would have spread like wildfire from one end to the other end. No question about that. Sorry. You know, the flames could have easily spread to the front of the building as well. And, you know, if there was windy weather, and other houses would have been at risk because of sparks flying. It was providence that day that no one died. You know, it was, you know, I mean, I don't know, I believe in God. So, yeah, and irrespective of how the fire started, the most shocking thing was the fact that I realized that for the past 6 years, I've been living in a matchbox, you know, and it was a fire waiting to happen. And I always thought that Samuel Garside House was safe. You know, I liked this area. You know, we were right in the middle of this regeneration project. And when we purchased the flat back in 2013, we were so happy, you know, because this was our first real home, because we'd been renting for several years previously. You know, and I shouldn't have to do all this fact checking, you know, about safety issues in a residential building. You know, when I'm buying a property, you know, I'm not an expert in building materials. You know, I'm not a health and safety inspector. You know, I leave all of that to the right experts, you know, for residential premises, and I'm paying for a safe place to live in. So, you know, I never questioned the safety of the timber-clad balconies in Samuel Garside House, because I always thought, stupidly enough, that, you know, the wooden, even though we had wood on our balconies, I'm sure it was safe. I'm sure they treated it with fire retardant substance, whatever, to stop the spread of fire in the event of a fire, you know. And then we had the tragedy of the Grenfell fire, and 72 lives were lost. You know, that was very sad. And all of a sudden, cladding was in the news, and then, you know, you got the government, you know, coming up with this regulation, you know, helping the corrupt building industry by saying that, you know, buildings over 18 meters in height should not have combustible cladding on them. But what about buildings below 18 meters in height? You know, people live in those buildings, you know, so basically they just don't care. You know, they put human lives at risk by, you know, making sure that buildings below 18 meters in height could still have flammable and combustible cladding on them. And this is just so wrong, really wrong. And then there's the other issue that you know, timber-clad balconies is considered an extension of the wall structure, you know, for the purpose of building regulations, so that they can get away with putting cheap, you know, materials on the balcony structure that absolutely does not resist fire. If anything, it accelerates the spread of fire. After the fire, I learnt that Samuel Garside House was signed off by the National House Building Council. And, you know, I've also found out that the building industry sort of buys materials that the NHBC endorse, or, you know, I don't know whether they sell materials or not. But if that's the case, you know, the fact that, and if they have signed off the building as safe, then that's a conflict of interest issue, you know, because it means that Bellway and NHBC are in it together, you know, and, you know, where was Barking and Dagenham Council? Why didn't their planning department carry out an inspection to sign off the building? I mean, I'm sure if they had done the inspection, you know, the risk of the wood fire because of the wooden clad balconies, I'm sure would have been raised. Anyway, going back to the day of the fire, you know, my husband left for work. I was out at around 5 p.m. I found out that my block was burning because a relative showed me a video footage on his mobile that Samuel Garside House was burning. I mean, as soon as I saw that, I was completely horrified. I was in such a state of shock. I don't know how I drove back to Barking, and my husband was traumatized by it all because we had a bereavement in the family earlier that year, and his father passed away back in January. Now we had this fire, and it was just all too much. And, you know, we were just standing there, and, you know, shocked, you know, horror, helplessness, powerlessness, you know, that I could see black smoke billowing out from, you know, all the doors in Block C, because I was standing on the park side, and I could see, you know, smoke coming out of my flat as well, because somebody obviously broke in and opened the balcony door, so all the smoke was coming out. I mean, it was an awful sight, and, you know, I'm just never going to forget that moment, you know, because I'm sure it's going to haunt me always. And then you have this fire risk assessment in January, you know, which clearly states, you know, that the wooden timber-clad balconies is a fire risk, you know, and burn injuries could result, and the fire could go into the flat, you know, and people would die, and nothing happens. And the Residents Association raises concerns about fire risk and safety following the Grenfell fire disaster, and still nothing's done. And then months later, we have the fire with devastating results. And, you know, all the residents are traumatized, you know, properties, possessions completely destroyed, pets perish in the fire, you know. And then you have the London Fire Brigade report also saying that the wooden cladding on the balconies actually helped with the spread of the fire. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, the residents have received, including myself, have received service charge bills, you know, of thousands of pounds. A lot of the residents have been displaced as a direct result of this fire, which could have been prevented in the first place by, you know, all the parties concerned, had the appropriate steps been taken to deal with it, but they didn't. You know, many households are still displaced, including myself. You know, it's been a year. I've not been in my flat. Only just recently they've contacted me to say to go back, and I said, how can I go back? I need to take my stuff there, you know, I need to carpet my flat, you know. So I've ordered carpet, and they said they're going to get it fixed, and still I'm hearing nothing from them. So it's just a waiting game basically. But the thing is, I've not been in my flat. It's been 1 year. Yeah. Why are they sending me a service charge bill? You know, what for? It's just ridiculous. So anyway, you know.
Thanks, Ruby. I mean, as one of the displaced, I think gave Ruby a little bit of extra time there to make those points, because I think it's necessary. Ruby did make some really marvelous points there and give some insight into the situation. I have Costi. If you would like to speak, Costi, yes, there you are. Could you unmute yourself and make some points? Thank you.
Hi, Pete. Yeah, good evening, everyone. I would like to start this interview with RMG. basically, they knew something is really wrong, and they've done absolutely nothing to protect us. So what's really frustrating and concerning is that you pay someone to take care of your building, to take care of you, to keep you safe, and exactly this entity, this company fails to do so. So they knew we were in danger, basically, and they've done nothing. They've just swept it under the carpet, and let's see what happens. How this is outrageous. This is not, it's not normal. How can even look us in the eye? You know, and on top of that, you should see the way they communicate with us, the way they talk to us. It's like we owe them something. It's like, oh, every time they are doing us a favor, and they do absolutely nothing. All the residents are basically, we had enough. Now going back to the fire, imagine taking your neighbors out, and you go outside and see your flat burning. This is undescribable. So how we felt that day. I mean, we thought everything is gonna go. The memories we've got now, all the stress we had to go through therapy to pass this stuff. It's not normal. They gave us so many nice words, you know, when we had that meeting with all the TVs present and all the press. So they said, yeah, you can only go back when you feel safe to do so, and as soon as, you know, a few weeks passed, they've tried to get us back in the building, as Michaela said, on a building site. So we had to live on a building site, and although we came back in end of November, as personally, me and Carmen, we are being charged for the period we've been away. Why is that? Why is this? How is this fair? And this is not all right. It's not like, basically, us residents, we suffer the most, and we have to pay for everything, basically. So it is left really terrible marks on us, to be honest. It is hard to go back to the way it was in the beginning. Right. Although we are coming home, it's not like home. You still feel like, you know, you're going back to it's really difficult. It's even hard to say in words. Yeah. So these stakeholders, they don't want to. All they want to do is make money. They don't care about us. They don't care. We've got families. They don't care. We've got kids. They don't care. We mean something to someone. They are ready to put us, you know, on the line just for them to make money. So this is not fair.
Okay.
We want to get rid of them, to be honest.
Yes. Thanks, Kosti. And
thanks so much, guys.
Just posted that if the councillors can help with the service charge. We've also got a lawyer who specialises in service charge, and this must be one of the things which we need to take up once again. So that's our presentation from our residents that we specifically asked. I see Serena is in the room. I don't know if she's got anything prepared for a couple of minutes to say. I don't want to put you on the spot. But if not, you can certainly come in later on because we'll have some questions. So I think the next thing to do then is to bring in Jennifer from Richmond House in Worcester Park, to speak 5 minutes on her situation over there.
Thank you. Hello everyone. I haven't met any of you, but I've spoken to Pete obviously recently, and I don't want to probably take 5 minutes. I'll probably be a lot less than that, because this is obviously about you guys tonight. I just want to introduce some of the commonalities we have and keep the conversation open so that we can keep in touch going forward. There's someone else from Richmond House on this meeting as well. So Agnes is also a Richmond House resident. So our fire happened exactly 3 months after yours, 9th of September. There's lots of differences. We have as many, like a web of stakeholders like you do. We just have the developer. We have a housing association who is the building owner and manager, because we're all shared ownership leaseholders. Also, a few people have scaled up to by 100%, but we don't have as many variations of different parties involved. So in some ways we have an easier time of it than you guys because of that. Our building was 4 stories high, 23 flats, 6 flats. Our fire was at 1:20 a.m. So you kind of described for your fire that if it had happened at night, how little time you'd have had to get out, and that's what happened in our building. It was at 20 past 1 or 25 past 1. But only 23 flats. 6 of them were water and smoke damaged at the front. Every other flat was either completely destroyed or completely charred, you know, like everything was gone in 17 of the flats. So we've all been displaced from our homes. So unlike you guys, we didn't have half of the people moving back in and so on. We've all been in temporary accommodation. Our building has been completely destroyed now, like it's been completely razed to the ground. And we're looking at a time frame of it being rebuilt possibly by late 2021. So we'd be 2 years out of our homes. So we have a lot of differences. What we do have in common with you guys is that we're a building under 18 meters. So every time that the conversation in government only focuses on high-rise tower blocks, every time that it only focuses on ACM and HPL cladding and ignores all the other issues, you know, that's where we want to try and raise our voice a little bit and get heard. And that's what we have in common with you guys as well, that we're in that sort of less protected or less even thought about or given any attention type of building. We also, I know your council have said that they're going to be doing a council-led inquiry, and they have said that they will be talking to our council, Sutton Council, to get lessons from our fire and draw them in. So hopefully some of our lessons will feed into the combined inquiry. And I guess, you know, we're not specifically in a place where we want to talk about the what specifically happened and what materials and what happened in our building, because we're still unpicking all that ourselves and working out where we take our case. But we are happy to obviously share information where it can help each other. So for example, on service charges, I've already mentioned to Pete, if it helps embarrass the people who are charging you service charges, to know that none of us have paid service charges. They were frozen from the day that our building went down. You know, so if it helps to sort of say, well, here's this other fire, you know, but hopefully we can use times like this to sort of share things that might help in each other's favour. And I guess, yeah, where we can get meetings, if, you know, a lot of the time we've been focused just purely, our energy is obviously focused on us getting our lives back together, our own residents and our own case. But where we can try and get attention or try and get meetings with people in government or anything like that about buildings under 18 metres, we can try and share those opportunities, bring your case into it at the same time. And yeah, that's kind of all I really want to say about our case, because I don't want to deflect onto our situation, but just to say really that we're happy to have made contact with you guys, and we hope that we can share lessons with each other that help each other along the way, and just, yeah, here to show solidarity really.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to bring in now Nuno, who will be our secretary, who will be talking about the commissioners' contributions and bringing in the commissioners, and I think at the same time Bishop, the Bishop of Barking would also like to make a comment, Nuno, as well.
Thank you, Pete. Hi, my name is Nuno. As Pete said, I'm the secretary for the Resident Association. I also live just a few meters away from where the fire happened, and I also live on one of the row 12 properties, which have all of them wood joining and is all flammable cladding, as it's been reported. So as you've heard, we've had testimony from several residents that have been directly and indirectly affected by the fire and the subsequent repercussions stemming from the lack of accountability for this horrific event. We also have expert witnesses sharing their comments on this matter with us, experts like Dr. Jonathan Evans, who is the chair of the technical committee for the Metal Cladding and Roofing Manufacturers Association. Dr. Evans is an expert witness on flammable cladding, who is often quoted in the media on these issues. He also attended the interim meeting of the Residents Association resident-led inquiry into the fire at Samuel Garside, which was on the 4th of March this year. The slideshow we presented, which you can find in our inquiry website, was entitled "Don't Worry, It Meets the Building Regulations." So these were precisely the types of comments in which Bellway Homes and Pinnacle Places had been responding to residents on the Barking Riverside estate when they raised concerns about fire safety, despite the fact that the balconies presented a real risk to life. We also had Suzanne Muna from the union, from Unite, the Union National Executive Committee member and Social Housing Action Campaign, SHAC, Communications Officer. Suzanne has submitted a statement on behalf of it, which condemned the failure of housing associations, London and Quadrant, so L&Q, and Southern Housing to safeguard the lives of the tenants and leaseholders at Samuel Garside on the Barking Riverside estate, for which L&Q is the de facto is the superior landlord. Following the case closely from a legal stance is Sean Murphy of Edwards, Duthie, Shamash Solicitors. The firm has been legally representing several affected residents. So now I'll call on each commissioner individually, and if anyone has any questions, please use the chat box to do so. Dr. Evans, would you like to address the meeting?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I didn't, obviously, like everybody else, want to take up a lot of your time. I just wanted to reassure you, because I see a lot on Twitter that people often say that nothing has been learned and so on, but I wanted to reassure you that this has been a very significant fire and driving change in the regulations and will continue to do so, I think. So all the efforts of everybody have been very worthwhile, and I hope that that can go to some extent to try and alleviate the pain in the long term, if you like. But there are some areas where we still have a lot of work to do, and for instance, you touched on my presentation about building regulations. Don't worry, it meets building regulations. We still need to change the culture within our regulatory body, and I think that your fire has been a painful lesson in that there's a huge misconception in the country about what building regulations are designed to do. They're not designed to protect your property. They are simply designed to get you out alive. So everything that you own, even your pets, your passports, your computers are used for work and so on, they are frankly all expendable as far as the regulatory body is concerned. So there will be, I can assure you, people within our MHCLG regulatory body that will look at your fire and frankly say, what's the problem? Everybody got out alive, building regulations did their job. And I continue to push for a different attitude. And it's been like that for as long as you can look back at records as well, at least 50 years before we had approved documents and we had prescriptive building regulations. It's always been about life protection. But we've just finished a review on the combustible ban, which is currently set at 18 meters. And the proposal from the government, due to campaigning from a lot of us and due to fires like yours and Jennifer's at Worcester Park, to try and drop that to 11 meters. I've been campaigning for a lower drop to a building height of 12 meters, which would be a story height of 8. So although 18 to 11 sounds like a big drop, the way they measured it has actually changed. So it's gone from being the floor level at 18 meters, the building height at 18 meters to the floor level at 11 meters. So in fact, that's probably now a difference between 18 and 14. So it's not quite the drop that you would expect. So for instance, it's quite possible to build a building at 5 stories and still sneak under the 11-meter rule. So Jennifer's building, which is being rebuilt in 2021, 4 stories, still wouldn't be covered by a combustible ban, whose threshold was 11 meters. So that begs the question, are we ever going to see guidance from MHCLG which places restrictions on materials even below 11 meters, so for 4-story buildings and 3-story buildings, because there still currently are none at all. But where we have made progress, obviously, is that threshold is going to drop. I'm assured of that. I think Ruby touched on the fact that attachments to external walls weren't considered part of approved document B in the restrictions. So now we have balconies are very much part of the consideration for external walls. And obviously your building has highlighted the dangers of other non-ACM materials, timber and so on. So, and we still have this situation with your scheme where the balconies clearly were extremely dangerous. You have an allowance within approved document B of 9mm timber. So there is still work to do to understand really how dangerous is cladding, which may be tongue and groove fixed to a wall. Is that safer than a balcony structure, for instance, with gaps in it? There's a lot of work to do left on that. And also, I think that getting a voice in building regulations, I think from people trying to encourage them to contribute to changes in building regulations. And one thing, if you follow me on Twitter, which absolutely drives me mad, is the architectural and industrial push for the use of timber in construction on the basis that it's better for the environment, etc. and so on. Nobody ever seems to ask the poor people who have to live in these buildings, what do they want? And the YouGov survey that the government did, the Labour Party did last year, showed that overwhelmingly people do not want to live in combustible buildings. So that's something we need to keep campaigning for and keep reminding architects that actually, would you mind thinking about the people who have to live in these buildings and deal with the risks that you subject them to, rather than just concentrating on your own campaigns to save the planet by building everything out of timber. So I thought I'd just leave it there. If you've got any more questions, I'm obviously happy to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Ms. Muna, would you like to add something?
Suzanne?
Yeah, hiya. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you? Okay, thank you. Okay, well, thanks for the invitation to say a few words today. There were a few things that I just wanted to go through. By way of introduction, I did actually, up until very recently, work at the Regulator for Social Housing, and my main role, I did have a substantive role, but my main role was as a Unite Trade Union representative. So I represented the members there, but I also represent members, around 3,000 members, because I'm a branch officer for our multi-employer Unite branch. And we represent about 3,000 members working in housing associations and other kind of associated bodies, so Homes England, regulator of social housing and organisations like that. But the vast majority are in housing associations. And it's absolutely no surprise to me that housing associations are implicated in this fire. And what's happened, because the nature of housing associations now compared to when the sector really got going has completely changed. They've gone from being kind of social interest and the idea of doing social good to being large-scale developers, and that is the absolute primary concern that they have. And just as you get loads of MPs and loads of councillors who are also landlords and therefore have no interest in changing the system to make sure that there are, for example, rent controls, when you have loads of MPs and loads of councillors who are themselves, landlords, have no interest in introducing rent controls. So with housing associations, the more money they make out of development, the less interest they have in actually the good of the tenants and what they were originally set up to do. And we've seen that drift just grow and grow and grow. And with L&Q, I mean, I think we should be looking at the money here because we look at L&Q and we look at Southern. L&Q is massive landlord, 95,000 owned or managed. Operating surplus, £305 million of operating surplus that they have. They have huge margins. They're around 30%, which if you were a company on the FTSE 100, you'd be offering your shareholders an extremely good rate of return. Their asset base is 12,153 million. I mean, this is a huge, very wealthy organisation. Southern is obviously smaller. They have around 28,000 units ownership or management. Their asset base is 620 million, and their operating surplus for the group is around 44 million. So they're a bit smaller. But I think these numbers kind of put the cost of removing, even if you got builders and you were paying them double time to work overnight, to strip the cladding from Samuel Garside House when you first alerted them to your concerns around it being a fire risk, that money doesn't even register for an organisation that has that kind of turnover and that kind of wealth behind it. There is absolutely no financial excuse for what they've done in sitting on your concerns for so long until a disaster, and even now they still haven't acted. There is just absolutely no excuse for it in financial terms. So, I mean, you've very eloquently outlined what the problems are. I don't think you need any more of that from me. But I think what I can just mention is some of the ways that, you might look at being able to actually force their hand a bit more and apply maybe a bit more weight to your campaign and a bit more push to the campaign to really get these housing associations to take note. And I do take note of the absolute web of companies that you've got here, which of course does complicate things and does make it easier for them to duck responsibility. And I just want to say one thing just about SHAC, which is the Social Housing Action Campaign, which is we use that as a means of us linking from our industrial members, if you like, in the branch, with the tenants that live in the homes that they sort of manage and organise in their day jobs, because it is really important that people actually make those links with the tenants. And that we fight on common cause issues, because most of our members are treated just as badly as the tenants are treated, the frontline workers. And that was really a way of us creating this bridge, which I think is unique amongst trade unions. I haven't really seen anything like that before. So I think it has been a really good initiative. So kind of knowing that these organisations have massive, reserves and massive amounts of money behind them, one of the things I would ask is whether there has been consideration of a service charge or a rent strike. And I accept that you do have leaseholders as well, but wherever you've got tenants, and particularly where you are having to pay, they are asking for service charges. Of course, you don't have to pay those service charges. it is a legalistic action to take. So if you know you were considering that, you would want to look very closely at the legal advice. It's as legalistic as it is for us to organise an industrial strike, a strike of our members, but it is extremely powerful. And I would look over at the rent strike that was threatened at one housing group in Newham, that led within 24 hours, because they were hiking their service charges and their rents by, so in some cases, 25% for key workers. And the threat, when they eventually moved to the threat of withholding and started to organise to withhold rents, the rent increased, not even the whole rent. Overnight, they got that threat withdrawn. It is an extremely powerful tool, and I think because housing associations are so terrified of tenants using it kind of en masse, really. Sorry. Shows me I've been talking too long. So that was just really, excuse me, what I wanted to end with. So sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. And finally, we have Mr. Murphy. Would you like to give us an update on where things stand with your firm and residents in general?
Sean, you'll have to turn your mic on.
You're muted, Sean.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Got you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. My own picture suggests I might be sitting in a dark room. I don't know how I appear on your screen. I don't know why this is. Apologies if my presentation looks slightly unusual. Some of you already know me, Sean Murphy, Senior Partner over Duffy Shamas, and since the fire of last year, we have now represented a total of 40 residents from Samuel Garside House. I came to be involved in this unfortunate state of affairs because my secretary is one of the residents, and I became immediately aware of the predicament that everybody was suffering because of the difficult situation that she was in. Things have been moving forward on behalf of those residents which we are representing. I'll briefly deal with the legal framework, some of which has already been touched upon. The Building Regulations 2010, as you've been told, stipulate that the external walls of a building shall adequately resist the spread of fire over the walls and from one building to another, having regard to the height, use and position of that building. Now, it seems to be clear that so far as Samuel Garside House is concerned, the timber cladding would not have satisfied that requirement, and that is a proposition which is perhaps beyond dispute. The building regulations in themselves do not impose legal liability, although the fact that the building regulations may not have been complied with or is a good prima facie evidence of legal liability in other areas, and that touches upon a piece of legislation called the Defective Premises Act, which imposes an obligation on every person who takes on work for or in connection with the provision of a dwelling, which is a very wide ambit, to see that the work which they take on is first of all done in a workmanlike or professional manner with proper materials, and so that as regard that work, the dwelling is fit for human habitation when completed. Now, given the fire that affected Samuel Garside House, it's unlikely that it could be suggested that that building was fit for human habitation. And that's a duty which is then imposed on a number of persons involved in the design, the building and management of the building. So the legal liability rests with the architect, the contractors, the builders, and the management company, and all of those individuals or organisations are, as it were, within our sights in terms of moving things forward and establishing legal liability and compensation for everybody who is affected by the events of this fire. So we're looking at the designers of Samuel Garside House and their roles, the main contractors, the freeholder, the head leaseholder, and management company will all fall to be considered. The report from the fire brigade is now available, and everybody is familiar with the details of that, so I won't repeat any of that which is familiar to you. We're now in the process of instructing a barrister who specialises in this area of the law and has had some involvement in the Grenfell proceedings, to advise on those topics which I've just told you about, the legal liability of the different persons and companies and organisations involved in the design, construction and management of this building. And as has just been alluded to by Ms. Muna, it's always helpful to look at those which have the deepest pockets, because they have the greatest ability to pay. So that's the stage which we're approaching on behalf of the residents. Our client base, it has a spectrum and range of experience. Some people suffered psychological distress as a result of what occurred. Some people lost a lot more than that in terms of their material possessions. Some people had their flats or their residences completely gutted by fire and were without anywhere to live as a home for many, many months as a result. So I hope that helps to bring everybody up to date and to give an overview. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can, but my preference is not to talk about anybody's individual case in a wider forum such as this. It's far better I deal with general issues rather than individual issues.
Thank you very much for all the contributions. Now I would like to talk about the residents.
Can we bring in? Sorry, can we bring in Bishop of Barking? I think Peter wants to talk as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. First of all, I am Peter Hill, the Bishop of Barking, which means in Church of England terms I have some responsibility not just for the churches in Barking area, but also across the 5 East London boroughs around it and including it. When the fire happened, I was away from London, sadly, and I was shocked to see the pictures on my television screen. I was in South Wales at the time. I grew up in South Wales in a council house, a strong, sturdy, old-fashioned council house built in the same sort of style as the Becontree estate originally. And we have moved away from all of that social housing, well provided and properly paid for and looked after. And that is part of our massive national problem as well as our local problem here. I just want to focus in on just 4 things rapidly. First of all, the well-being of the residents who've lost their homes and been in fear of their lives. You know, I hope that counselling has been given and taken up. If the church locally can help any further with that, please contact me. Your well-being is imperative in all of this, past well-being and present well-being. Secondly, the heartrending stories just remind me that there is responsibility here, which has been obvious. The fact that you're still being asked to pay for service charges and some of the wood structures have not been removed from other flats is appalling, and we need to just remind ourselves continually of that and challenge their own responsibility, not just legally, but in other ways, which I'll come to. So well-being, responsibility, justice. This is a local justice issue. You know that. Appallingly, 1 year on, very little has been done to address the issues that have been so well mentioned tonight. Nationally, there needs to be change, and politically, we can be part of that if we will work together. 18 meters high ruling needs to go, leasehold needs to go, and removing offshore owners in it just for the profit, like Adriatic, also needs to go. Now, that's a long-term justice national project, but it needs to be addressed. We've seen in this last week how, you know, an uprising of national feeling can change things. And finally, my final point is just, how can we act in the future? How can you act, and others of like me can assist? There needs to be concerted action in partnership with Worcester Park, with Grenfell, etc. And there's no substitute but getting organized together with others to make these changes happen, and understanding who has the power and addressing those power holders for justice. One of my favorite sayings that some in the church have heard me use often, and I finish with this, is very simple. It comes from William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army. You can't change the future unless you disturb the present. It is our duty and our calling, whatever our faith or lack of faith, to look to change the future. That's a disturbing thing. It's a disturbing thing to do, but it is necessary to do. And I just want to encourage you and all of us who want to assist to be part of making serious change happen, and to disturb whoever it's necessary to disturb, to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that will bring me to our residence demand number 2, which is resident control over the estate, which means having a resident majority on the community company, or also known as CIC. This CIC is supported by the local council, since they've signed off on the original terms of reference, which states a resident majority. And why is it important to be talking about the CIC and a resident majority board? In light of what happened with Samuel Garcet House, and continues to happen throughout the whole estate, the one thing that is lacking is accountability. If we can have this diagram put up. Okay, thank you. So as you can see from this diagram, the complexity of the accountability structure in what is Barking Riverside. We have the Greater London Authority with L&Q that own Barking Riverside Limited, which is the superior landlord. But they have sold the freehold to an investment company called Adriatic, which in part uses Homeground as a managing agent, who uses RMG as block manager and Pinnacle as estate manager. Not to mention the various builders like Bellway Homes and Mace and so on. And of course, local government, our very own Barking and Dagenham Council. Kind of makes your head spin a little bit, doesn't it? It makes it even harder to pin down accountability when something goes wrong. So here's a list of the council directors on the actual CIC as it stands at the moment. We have Cameron Geddes, which is our local councillor, which was appointed on the 13th of January 2012. We had the council deputy leader, Simon Ashraf, which was appointed on the 27th of February 2012 and stood down on the 11th of July 2014. And we have our own council leader, Darren Rodwell, which was appointed on the 11th of July 2014. Now, what is the purpose of the Barking Riverside CIC? According to the report of the council CEO dated 22nd of December 2009, the CIC will ensure that the new community facilities housing and population growth at Barking Riverside is managed in a way that will provide a sustainable and safe community for new residents while allowing LBBD to continue providing the same level of service to the remainder of the borough. Now, through a resident majority board on the CIC, which will eventually take control of the estate's assets once Barking Riverside is complete, it means local people having the ability to decide what's best for them and their community. Whether to have a say on how to use a particular space, how shops and other retail spaces are used, how parks are equipped, what a local doctor's surgery should provide, how much we want spent on cutting the grass, but also for residents who have a voice when more serious events like a fire happen. So residents have the ability to hold those responsible to account. Bob Colnetz recently published a book called The Property Lobby, which stated, the Barking Flats fire illustrates exactly the lack of accountability that is now deeply embedded in urban developments in the UK because of the complex deals that local authorities have entered into their search for land and funding for housing. In these deals, the number of units come first, but the provision of community infrastructure and the needs of tenants and residents seem to come last. Now, I'll leave you with a video made on the day of the fire when Margaret Hodge and Sadiq Khan were addressing the residents and the victims of the fire. But unfortunately, you might not have audio from it.
Yeah, I'll try. Let me just let me see if it works with sound, because Margaret Hodge actually addresses the complexity of all of the stakeholders involved within the Barking Riverside estate. So let me see if I can get this playing with sound. If not, I'll just try and copy the link on the chat box and you guys can watch it at a later date. So let me do that now. And I share. Can you hear that?
No.
No sound.
No. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
I'll share that.
You could still play it, but I'll just say, oh, it's gone. So, so thanks, Nuno, first of all, for presenting those reports, and thanks to the expert speakers. And just to reinforce that we are battling as a resident association to get this community interest company on Barking Riverside to be majority resident controlled, and that's an ongoing battle which we invite you to participate in. We can't really make any more points about that. I will be now introducing our councillors. We've got two councillors here, Councillor Bill Turner and Councillor Camera Geddes. Before I do that, unfortunately, we've had apologies from Darren Rodwell, who was intending to come along. He declined on the basis that he'd only seen our presentation at the Barking Riverside Fire website the day before. It did come out on the 27th of May, but I don't think even then he would have had time to comment on that in detail because he would have wanted to go through lawyers and so forth. So it wasn't our intention to bring Darren Rodwell on to reply to this inquiry, but to present his testimony on behalf of the council to this inquiry. And what we will be doing now is calling on Mr. Rodwell to present a written contribution to the inquiry. I think it should be by the end of September, which gives you, what, 3 months, in order to explain a number of points which we would like the council to address that are raised. And in actual fact, they were raised in June of 2019. So it's not as if the points that are being brought up at this inquiry were not already public knowledge. The criticisms of the council from the point of view of granting planning permission and so forth were already public knowledge, and he could have brought those points to bear. But this is what we will be proposing. We put to Darren a number of points that have arisen from this resident association, this resident-led inquiry, and ask him to the council in general to come back on them. But we are pleased to have a representative from Mace, David Reynolds. I wonder, David, if you could get ready to come in first, and then after that, I will bring in Cameron Geddes and then Bill Turner. If that's okay with you, David, you could unmute yourself. You could make a comment. Can you hear me? I'm not sure. Can you unmute yourself and make a comment, or do you want to come in after the councillors have spoken? This is a question for David Reynolds. You'll have to unmute yourself. Click on the screen.
Yeah, it's muted.
You're still muted. You have to click on the screen and unmute. Yeah, the mute button appears when you click on. Got you.
If I could come in afterwards, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Right. Yes, I'll bring you in 10 minutes' time. I'll give 5 minutes each to Cameron Geddes and Bill Turner if they require it. So, Cameron, unfortunately, my screen doesn't show everybody, so I'm not sure if you're listening. Can you come in? It's just yes, we have Cameron. Right, off you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm just gonna. Okay. This is going to ramble a bit because, as you can imagine, I've been trying to take notes as things have gone on. I mean, I must say it's both nice and depressing to see so many familiar faces from people. Yet again, a year on, faces that very sadly I only got to know in some cases in the days after the fire. The service charge issues it's an issue you've already covered. The frustrations that the democratically elected representatives have got in trying to hold to account a body that isn't answerable either to the council or to the MP. I think the MPs, dare I say, somewhat more combative style sometimes has more success than mine, and I think her letterhead carries more weight than mine. So I don't want to pass responsibility for that, but I do usually say to people when they've approached me over the course of the last year, I'm sympathetic. I'll write if you want, but frankly, it's better to try and I can do that. I can get the MP involved. So we'll continue trying to do that. I'd be curious if Dr. Evans and or Mr. Murphy had suggestions now as to what things the council should now be lobbying. Darren's done most of that. We've done all of it, really. I'm not been involved in the details. I think we're just saying below 18 metres, but I must admit I hadn't thought about what level until Jonathan started to raise that 12 metres, 11 metres, and the different definitions. Be grateful for that. I think it'd be interesting, not tonight, if people could think about it and let us know, or let me know directly, when the council kicked in on the emergency plan, what worked and what didn't. Were we fast enough, not fast enough? Because heaven forbid we get another one of these soon, but we're almost resigned to, I suppose, the council at some point needing to do this again. So it would be handy to know, well, yeah, that worked, but you should have done this better, you could have done that better. That, though, does lead me to, I think it would be remiss not to pay huge tribute to the volunteers. I mean, on the night, on the afternoon, the bus drivers, for example, were
Have we suddenly lost? It's something that doesn't happen in a public meeting. Suddenly disappears.
All right, I think if we can bring Bill Turner now, whilst Cameron gets back.
Yes, Bill, do you want to speak?
Hiya, folks.
Bill, go ahead.
I've just messaged Cameron a 3-word message saying you went dead, and hopefully he'll come back, and hope that's not tempting fate. Thank you for the invitation. Apologies for Third Council of Thames or Josie Channer. As some of you might know, Josie and me are a couple. We've got very small children. She's putting them to bed, and we're not particularly playing ball tonight, so she's unable to be here. I've got quite a lot of noises off. It's been very powerful to hear the testimony really from this meeting. To go back really with some of the issues, I've heard the points that are made about the CIC, and I have to say, you know, it's a matter of record. Since I was first elected to a council in 2014, I've always thought the governance around Barking Riverside, both in respect of the CIC and kind of probably even more so in terms of the property and land ownership, is a labyrinth, and not in a good way. And I think the points made about accountability are correct. You know, I can't really either take issue with those or add on to those. And there's absolutely a piece of work to be done about Adriatic in particular. Yeah, I think most people, you know, my own view, and I'm happy to hear from anyone who's got a different view, is in terms of the response to the fire, in terms of the kind of humanitarian response, if you like, the council performed, but you know, well at this time in terms of the input and resources and the people on the ground. But you know, people don't want to hear that when they've lost their home and still haven't been able to move back into it. And you know, I'm always very happy to hear feedback, both positive and not positive, about how a council did at this time. I mean, I do remember the day after. What was extraordinary is I think there were about 40 council staff on the ground at the time. This is the day after the fire itself, and she's what's called a gold commander, so she's now our deputy chief executive, could not get through to one person from home ground. Eventually a couple of people turned up, and so I absolutely don't want to be here to just sing the council's tune, but there is for me very much something about having publicly accountable organisations and people you can elect and get rid of, like me, running things, not companies for profit. I mean, it's not particularly controversial that I hold that view. What's been interesting as well is there's quite a lot of, I guess, having been at the thick of this, in some ways, it causes me some concern that even the public investigatory reports from the fire brigade and others, I think it's too complex a thing to get hold of those. So Inside Housing, who have, many of you will know, have done, you know, some really good work on this and indeed on other fires. Sadly, there's been too many. They did a scoop about 3 weeks ago with a report that was leaked. I've forgotten the name of the organisation who were commissioned by the fire brigade. For example, you kind of think maybe externally that councillors and MPs will get hold of stuff like that, and actually we didn't. That might be a case of kicking down a few more doors, or it might be a case of actually looking at the laws around how information is shared, because actually as a council we have a health and safety duty to a community, and when people build buildings with flammable materials on them, then, you know, I think it's important that we know that as a council. I'll let Cameron talk in more depth if he returns about the planning process and the constraints on councils that the planning system that we have, in my view, not nearly robust enough, and councils are always vulnerable to developers with deep pockets appealing decisions, but that's not to kind of move the role of a council out. I see there's a comment, a very valid comment in the comments about Be First. Be First is a new organisation, so it wasn't responsible for the initial planning, but it, you know, it is clearly an important partner moving forward here. Happy to respond to any questions or queries that come up now, and I've put the 3 of our email addresses. So if anyone has something either I don't want to discuss tonight, or just comes up and it's a bit too technical or individual to be dealt with in the discussion, we normally try and turn around emails as quickly as possible. That being said, we can be knocking at a closed door when it comes to being someone with a democratic mandate, speaking to Adriatics of this world, but it doesn't mean we won't try, and I'll continue to do that. Really interesting to hear from the colleague from Sutton, who's also lost her home. People will be aware that the council leader commissioned a report that's been done by Steve Bullock and someone called Dermot Ward, that's also seeking to look into not only the fire itself, but the governance, and to make some recommendations. And I know it's a separate process to this inquiry. I don't see any reason why people shouldn't engage with both. You know, and if people are doing written submissions, send them to both. If people want to have conversations, you know, have 2 sets of conversations. I think, you know, it's not for me to say what the right framework is, and I think to have 2 inquiries is clearly better than none. So I hope that's been helpful and useful. But if people have any feedback, positive or otherwise, about that process, then also very happy to hear that, and I will channel that back as best as possible. Do you want me to mute Pete?
Okay.
Plenty of people do. I'll do that now.
Right, thanks, Bill. Cameron's back online again. Bill, it would be, we do certainly want to participate in the council inquiry. I don't think we've been contacted as a resident association, and it'd be very good if you could ensure that we are contacted, or provide us a way of getting more input to the inquiry organised by the council. So that's a request to yourself there, Bill. And Cameron, are you now able to pop back into the discussion?
No, Cameron has dropped down again.
He dropped out again. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Right. So I hadn't thought that Subbu would be well enough. Oh, no, I've nearly forgotten to bring in David Reynolds. David, this is your slot. If you could.
I think Pete might be frozen.
Peter, could you just remind me of what you would like me to contribute, please?
I think Pete is frozen as well. Too many people using Virgin Media. I think you might need to log out and log back in. Let's see.
Really frozen out.
Yeah, you can't really. Let's remove him so he can join again. Hopefully he'll join. I guess what the resident association want from the builders, and obviously council members and well, everyone that is being involved and is here tonight, is to just give us an account of, you know, what you represent Mace, David, if I'm not mistaken, which is one of the builders on the estate, particularly on the townhouses and the kind of open plan houses, which are also covered with the wooden cladding. My property, for instance, is one of them, which has around sort of 40% of this particular cladding, and there are other properties that have up to 60% of this flammable cladding with no second exit. So in the event of a fire, their entrance, which is basically covered in wooden cladding, is a serious risk, serious fire risk. So basically what we're really trying to get from you is, I'm sure you haven't had time to go through all of the report that we've put together, but at least give us a sense of what your company has learned from what happened last year, if there's been any changes, if you started getting in touch with homeowners, what measures will be put in place for fire assessment or fire safety within the estate, and obviously if that's you can't provide all of that, we would request that you write something to us within the next sort of 3 months or so.
Yeah, okay. Is there anybody from Barking Riverside on the call? Because they are leading the work in conjunction with the other leaseholders on the property and Bellway Homes.
So
just a bit of background.
Matt Carpenter from BRL is not present. He's declined the invitation. Just to make you aware.
Right. Okay. Just as a bit of background as far as Mace are concerned. Mace constructed some of the properties on the estate, some of the houses, and this was some time ago. We've had engagement with Barking Riverside and the other leaseholders, the other owners of the properties, or the other freeholders, who I understand have now all agreed that changes will be made. I personally have not been engaged in those conversations for the last few months because those were passed on to some of my colleagues who were dealing with it. And the last conversation I had with them was that they had written to all residents earlier in the year, which is what I was advised, to let them know that this was happening and that there was going to be 2 houses were going to be done with the proposal for the revised material for residents to look at and to gain their approval. I don't know if that's been communicated with you or not. And with a plan then to actually start changing the properties. The last understanding I had was that the freeholders were, Southern Housing, Bellway Homes, GLA, were planning to do the upgrade on all the properties. I'm familiar with the property that you referred to with the single exit, but that's all I know, unfortunately, at the moment. So I'm sorry I can't sort of give you a lot more detail than that. Certainly, it shouldn't be for Mace to be writing to you. It should any correspondence will come from Barking Riverside, who are actually representing the freeholders.
Okay, David, thanks for that. It's quite frustrating that you mentioned that, because on the letter that we received from BRL only yesterday, they say that the builders would get in touch with the residents. So, we're playing a game of pass the bucket.
Unfortunately, I haven't. Yeah, no. If I'd known that there was a letter sent yesterday, I wouldn't have said what I've just said. But unfortunately, I didn't know that there was this letter sent. I will contact BRL tomorrow and find out what they mean by that. And
that'll be great.
Certainly, if there is something that needs to be written, fair enough. We will do what we need to do. But I assume they would have been probably talking about Bellway Homes, but.
They don't specify any particular builder, but
right. Okay. Well, I'll contact Matt tomorrow and find out what's going on. As I said, I've been out of the loop personally myself for a short while.
Okay, that'd be great if you can. And could we expect some sort of written response to our report from either yourself or your superiors, or as a company, from a company as a whole?
Well, the report focuses predominantly on the fire at Samuel Garside, which we had no involvement on, either constructing it or post involvement. So I'm not sure what kind of response you want from us.
We would like you to address our 3 demands, and our first demand is obviously removal of all flammable cladding within the estate and replacement with adequate non-flammable cladding. Obviously, Mace is not responsible for the whole of the estate, only part of it, and obviously, I think that concerns you.
Can I just say we're not? Can I correct that? If I can correct you, Mace are not responsible for any of it. Just as a correction, Mace are not responsible for any of it because we are not freeholders for any part of the estate. We were a contractor undertaking instructions from the freeholders.
You've built the
we're
properties.
Not responsible, but we are assisting the freeholders with technical.
You've built some of the properties on the estate, right?
I'm not going to have this argument, unfortunately.
If you could find the time to give us a written response, that would be great. And obviously get in touch with BRL, because BRL is saying that residents are going to hear from the real builders or the developers, and you're saying that we should be getting contact from BRL. So, residents
I'll speak to BRL tomorrow.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Okay. I'm back, having my phone completely crashed. The BRL did put out a circular saying that there will be a website which the owners of the houses with all the wood on the front will be able to go to. But there has been a proposal made by a resident that we should get an independent person to be involved as some kind of expert who we appoint to help us, because I know that for a fact that the Samuel Garside House residents had a real run-in with RMG, who organised the consultation on their behalf for the replacement of the wood with the metal. They did end up with a completely different colour material to what they understood to be the case. The roof across the top balconies is just slats and does not at all appear the same as the CGI, the computer-generated image that was given to the residents, and just lets in the water, whereas a picture showed a solid roof. And so there have been ongoing problems, and so it may be that it will be useful to engage somebody on our side as far as that's concerned. So that's a proposal that's come up just in the last day or two from a resident of one of the houses. We are at 12:15. I want to bring in Sabu to speak, and then I want to bring in Serena to speak. They're both residents of Samuel Garside House, because I know they both indicated, and I think Yasir also indicated that he wants to ask a question. So I haven't checked to see if Sabu is still with us. He was in his...
Yeah, I'm here.
You are? Good, right. Fire away.
Hi. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak here. I won't take much of the time. We all know how devastating this fire has been for all of us, and we have exactly completed a year now. Basically, it's been ups and downs for me and my family because of this fire, and my work environment was quite flexible enough that I could take some days off during the process of moving different places. Like we moved literally about 3 or 4 places in the span of a year, and then finally we are back in Samuel Garside House. I specifically want to highlight about the service charges and these things which already Kosti has spoken about. I mean, we need someone to frankly look at this because we were out for nearly about 8 months to 9 months, and still we are being billed for the charges which we were not even here, and the services being provided by RMG has been utterly poor. They knew about this, fire hazards, and there were so many, systems which were not functioning before the fire. We did highlight to them a number of times, but it was simply ignored, and they were just, behind all of the residents chasing for the money without even caring for what services they need to offer us for the money that we pay. So that's one thing which I would like, the senior members over here in this call to specifically take a note of. And the increase in service charges has been substantial. It's been like nearly 100% rise in a span of 2 years. Without any, without much service improvements. So that's one thing which I wanted to highlight. And the second one was, about Pete already spoke about the design consultation of the balcony, which was as per the process. But I would say it was just a process. It was never taken into account. I specifically mentioned about the roof. I'm on the top floor. That we need to have a solid roof. I mentioned it about 3 times. The council members were there. Specifically, this was noted down. And when we see the actual design now, it's huge gaps in the slats, and these are just slats, and the rainwater does flow through completely with the current design. Earlier it was better, where the rainwater was stopping, but it's actually not improved, but it's become worse. So I would like someone to please take a note of this and query this with the builders, Belway specifically. Yeah, I mean, we are back in Samilgar side, and I think the neighbors whose properties were destroyed will be back soon as well. So I mean, these are some of the challenges, but I would like to post some positives as well. During the fire, council did a good job. I mean, specifically, helping out the residents who were displaced, providing them with the needful, necessary things. My son did get an admission in the nursery over here for 15 hours during that period when it was necessary. So some of these things were quite good from the council. So I would like to thank them on that. But it's been ups and downs in this past year. I would like to specifically make a mention of RMG to as the managing agent to be dealt with the regards to the service charges and the design consultation, which is not as per our discussions, which was agreed. Which Pete has already mentioned about it. That's all. I think many other people have already mentioned about what effect we have had. Yeah, I mean, that's about it from my side.
Thanks, Sabu. And Serena, did you want to make some points? Again, another resident of Samuel Side House. Go ahead.
Hiya. So I'm Serena Madhavan. I'm on the resident of Samuel Garside House. I think, summarising some of the things that you've said, I think it's quite shocking, really, that Councillor Darren Rodwell and Matt Carpin from BRL both declined to attend this event. You've all taken the time, and we've all taken the time to attend this meeting as we feel it's important at a local and a national issue, but they've chosen not to be part of it. So what does that show? And doesn't it prove that they're paving the way for other stakeholders to avoid engagement? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all been about. It's a lack of collaboration and communication in order to move forwards and make sustainable change. Over the past 12 months, there has been no leadership and there's been no accountability. Stakeholders have chipped in to give the illusion that they've done their bit, but the effectiveness has been minimal, as it's not been strategic or triangulated by those who can make real change. Everything just seems to be reactive instead of it being proactive. For instance, the council started its own inquiry after the Residents Association started this one. How is that engaging residents and forming a formal partnership?
All right. Thank you very much. Serena.
Very good, thank you.
I have, Yasir, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, am I audible enough?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, just, I mean, part of my question was already asked by Serena, so I'll just kind of add to what she said. And she's right that two of the most important stakeholders in this tragedy are not here. Leader of the council and developer. I mean, no matter from which angle you look at it, their absence is indefensible and unjustified, to say the least, considering that they know the range and the intensity of the problems we have been undergoing both before as well as since the fire. So I'm not sure if Cameron is still there, but then in their absence, I would like to direct my question at him. Considering the fact that, you know, he is a director on the Barking Riverside Community Interest Company, and I believe along with the leader of the council, he sits on the board. And in his official capacity, he is responsible for safe and sustainable development. And as a cabinet member, he is responsible for housing and is a lead for planning, which means that he signed off the Barking Riverside planning regulations. Now, he is completely aware of the innumerable emails illustrating various and never-ending issues residents have been bringing to his attention. Now, just to cut a long story short, can I request him that he apologize to all the residents of this estate for the sheer pain which we have gone through, and literally on so many occasions when injury has been added to our insult, and extend those apologies on behalf of the leader of the council. So that's one. Number two, if he's hearing me, or if maybe some other councillors can maybe make a quick note and pass it on to him if he's not on the call, can he tell us at least, though the number is more, but I'm just kind of pinning it down to only 3 things which he feel he can do to address our concerns. If he is struggling to come up with those 3 things, we can, on behalf of the Residents Association, get together and we can tell him, okay, these are the 3 things we are looking, for council along with the developer to address. And this becomes all the more ironic when I'm right now looking at a Facebook wherein Darren Rodwell has posted a video. So, you know, it's kind of so strange, you know, this is the forum for you, not there out there online when it is just a PR stunt. So if someone is able to kind of summarize my thoughts and pass it on to people for answer, please.
Okay, well, Cameron is still in the meeting. I mean, the 3 things that we, so Cameron, if you could come back on any of that. And while you're getting ready to do so, Cameron's off mute now. The 3 things that we're raising, we've outlined already. And one of the most important ones is that we have resident majority on the community interest company. The Bishop of Barking also echoed our demand to have Adriatic removed. We think they have no right to still be on the estate, and there is general agreement that the cladding, vulnerable cladding, should be removed. And one of the residents has posted, "What about Dalton House?" And there are other flats that have either got some of the ACM cladding, some flats that have got balconies where the flooring, the decking, appears to be ungraded eco deck material, which could transmit fire from one flat to another upwards. Those are our 3 demands that we're raising. Cameron, could I bring you in to respond to anything? And then we must, I think we must close the meeting after that.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time, and I've dropped out 3 or 4 times during the course.
Yeah.
The 3 specific things Vanilla wanted me, and you've just wanted me to address on the cladding. I thought BRL had agreed that and was going ahead with it. The council, I don't think we'd have any problems with that. But again, I can say that there's a limited role we've got on that. The kick has largely become moribund. It was predominantly anyway to do with the external management. So I'm not sure it would have impacted upon fire safety issues much, if at all. I think that's going to depend on the future funding of the rest of the development, about whether or not how many residents that are on there. I think the expectation is there'll always be some. Whether a majority, I think, is probably going to be questionable. But I think that's currently being consulted on going forward. So I can't give you an assurance on that. I can't give you an assurance on any of them, unfortunately. Adriatic, I think the Bishop and I might be at one on that, but I'm not sure how I'd go about doing that. So I've gabbled through quickly in case I drop out. Quickly, the other points on is it Yasser's comments? Yeah. Three things. Apology. Yeah, I apologise, but I can't apologise to anyone else. I remember asking questions about the wooden cladding, and as Dr. Evans commented, don't worry, building regulations, it's all compliant. We wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't compliant. So I couldn't really have double guessed them. I have to rely on the expertise. And similarly, the point about signing off the planning application, officers will have made a recommendation that would have been presented to councillors. It was planning compliant and with the Barking-Dagenham framework, which of course relies largely on the Mayor for London's framework and national planning framework. Had it been rejected, it would have won on appeal. The building regulations and fire protection don't normally play much, if any, role in the planning application there as such.
And suddenly it looks like Cameron, let me just check, has actually, yes, he's completely disappeared. So funnily enough, it is now 1 minute before we must close the meeting. So we have agreed at this meeting that we will attempt to get a response from the council and from the other bodies to the presentation that we've made by September. We need to follow up on the dispute in relation to Mace and to what extent the properties that Mace has been involved in the building of will get the same treatment. But my time is out. I think we must now thank everybody for joining us. And I will have to say thank you very much, and we'll see you again.
Hopefully sometime in September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your leadership. Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bill and Josie. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks. Bye, Joanna.
Bye. Bye.
Oh, you're back again, Cameron. You dropped out when I closed the meeting. Oh, you're still muted, I think, now. Oh, you're not muted. Oh, but I haven't got any sound even then. You're not muted, but there's no sound. It might be that we've finished the meeting, no longer will conduct sound. My phone just completely died. The app killed it completely. I had to restart it. Okay, I think everybody's. I still can't hear you, Cameron. We'll have to talk by, yeah, sign language. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Melanie, for staying through the meeting. I hope to see. It's you and yours, isn't it? Would it be tomorrow? You're muted.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Yes, it should be on tomorrow. So we're doing a piece on the, there's a mental health survey that's been done by the UK Cladding Action Group. So there's going to be an interview on that, but then within this, we're going to kind of highlight the fact that, you know, your barking is kind of what everybody fears, that there has been a fire, and that even when there's a fire, it doesn't kind of, you know, action to remediate and replace cladding is still very slow. And we'll be kind of saying that, you know, and now that you're you want the freeholder replaced, so it will be part of a little sequence looking at cladding. If that makes sense.
Good. Well, thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you. It was very interesting, actually. There's a few things maybe I can follow up at some point, but good luck with it all.
Yeah, we overran, of course. If we'd have had more time, we would have brought you in, and there's Inside Housing were here too, but I really literally ran out of time.
Yeah, no problem. All the people freezing, it doesn't help, does it? But I think that now we're in these new times, I think it all happened quite well in the end. Relying technology.
I just hope I wasn't talking over David Reynolds. I suspect I was, but I'm trying to sort myself out. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, no, it was very interesting. So thank you very much. I'm just copying a few links to those presentations that are in the chat before I leave.
All right. Okay. We'll leave it open for a minute.
Thanks. Yeah, if you don't mind, just for 1 second, because I want to just copy the link to Jonathan Evans. And there was one other I wanted to